So first, I'd like to start off with Ruth Leary. Ruth is the head of strategy and engagement at AgriZeroNZ, a public-private partnership investing to fast-track tools and technologies that help farmers cut emissions. Raised on a sheep, beef, and deer farm in New Zealand, she brings extensive leadership experience across global agribusiness, specialty ingredients, and dairy export sectors, and is passionate about helping farmers drive sustainability, particularly in pasture-based systems. Please help me welcome Ruth Leary. Down goes forward.
The bottom one does.
Yes.
Thank you so much for having me here. It really is a little bit like Christmas when you're a fund investing in solutions for methane, and there's a whole room of people passionate about it, and solution providers too. So thanks for having me. I am from New Zealand. You're hearing from another New Zealander, one without an Irish accent, unlike our speakers yesterday. So I'm going to try and move this now. Yes, there we go, AgriZero, powering zero emissions agriculture, which is our bold ambition. So I'll explain a little bit about what our model for investment is. So we're a world-first public-private partnership, actually set up as a joint venture between the New Zealand government and 10 of our private sector agribusinesses. So these are the dairy companies, the meat companies, the fertiliser companies, as well as the banks, the financiers, for the agriculture sector. It is in New Zealand, it's foundational to our economy, so you can see that it took a real collaboration and that there was a need for this collaboration and amplification of investment to try and drive progress on emissions reduction. So our ambition at AgriZero, on behalf of all of our companies, and this was signed up to by all the chief executives, was a 30% reduction in methane specifically, and in nitrous oxide by 2030 from a 2017 baseline. It's quite bold, and it is more aggressive than our own government's target, but they have signed up to it because we're tasked with being really bold. By 2040, we're aiming for near zero. So our focus is on pasture-based solutions. That's really important for New Zealand. Our animals are out grazing nearly all of the time, even if our dairy herd, parts of the year they are fed twice a day in the shed as they're getting milked. But we also believe for global impact, actually solutions for extensive grazing and pasture are really important, lower input solutions. So we hope what we're doing in New Zealand can be a fantastic test and trial for around 80% of those emissions globally that are coming in lower input systems like ours, or more similar to ours. And you did hear yesterday about our footprint. So over half of our emissions are coming from agriculture. So far, for the first 4 years, our investors have put $191 million into our fund, which doesn't sound like a lot of money, but it's a very focused remit. We're literally focused on livestock emissions and just on methane and nitrous oxide. And again, those solutions that are not suited necessarily for a feedlot or a barn, but more suited for extensive systems. We've found it quite powerful in that the government and the sector, the private sector, are collaborating so closely together. The government has matched the funding dollar for dollar from those 10 private sector investors to reach that total. We're just currently negotiating what the next 6 years will look like and how much money is needed to take solutions through to commercialisation and the market. We've found it very useful as an investor to sit down with companies and with ventures or co-investors and collaborators to say, we have access to nearly every farmer in New Zealand through the reach of our partners, great for adoption, but also we get to sit at the table and talk with the regulator and the policymaker and bring them the insights we're hearing from the scope of solutions being developed, from the global, competitive landscape of emissions reduction. And we're pretty competitive in New Zealand. We want to be the best and the first to bring things to market. So yeah, we're trying to bring that insight and work about smart ways and fit for purpose regulation as well for this new range of products that are coming down the pipe. So I think you've heard this, New Zealand really do focus on emissions. And that's why this partnership was put together. We are selling over 95% of our dairy product offshore, as well as a huge portion of our beef and lamb, our sheep. We also have, 3 of our biggest free trade agreements rely on us making progress and have sanctionable commitments to the Paris Agreement. It's okay to say that out loud in this room, I assume. And really our ambition, not only is it the right thing to do to reduce methane, you know, if all of the small contributors, like New Zealand, we're a small contributor globally, if all of us decided that we just have done enough already, then that's a dangerous position to be in. So the companies that we call sometimes and make supply agreements with, you know, on the bottom of the chart, you see some of the logos. A lot of those companies are spending a lot of money, billions sometimes, in New Zealand on our product. They have set Scope 3 targets that are quite aggressive, and we are doing our best to support them in that reduction. Everything going offshore is going straight into the supply chains of those companies, which is why we really feel strongly that market-led pull for emissions reduction, and particularly the premium customers, which is where we need and should be playing as a small country. We want to be at the top of the pack when those global buyers are choosing suppliers. And to do that, that means lower emissions and lowering our footprint. Not that easy in a pasture-based system, which is why we're here. So we set up a lean team. We've got 15 people. We've been going for 2.25 years now. 3 functions, so strategy and engagement, which is really my function, assessing the landscape, collaborating and networking, so thanks again for having me here, and supporting our ventures and catalyst teams on what are the things that we could be investing in that will suit the farming system in New Zealand. We do things like host regulatory workshops, we support our ventures, our startups we've invested in when they come to New Zealand to get to meet with producers and processors, with the regulator and policymaker, as well as the research providers. Ventures, so we're investing venture capital. So we're taking equity stakes in companies, often startups, who are developing a promising solution that we see can fit into the farming system in New Zealand. We're trying to address the emissions from dairy as our dominant source, but also from beef and from sheep. So yeah, trying to find those solutions. We will invest typical check size from 1 to 10 million, but quite flexible in the way we'll work with companies and navigate that. And on the catalyst side, that's really a market shaping role. We're trying to maybe in some cases make an investable company. In other cases, we're thinking about what are the constraints in the system that slow us all down. Do we need to do some on-farm trials that will answer a lot of questions at once? Do we need some more infrastructure? So those are the things we're trying to think about on the catalyst investment side. But just to point out, most of our capital is deployed through equity investment. Looking ahead, so we know in New Zealand we will have to have at least 2 to 3 things in widespread use with high uptake to achieve our ambition by 2030. So we think the first tools, which looks like it could be the slow-release bolus, will be in the market and start its commercialisation journey by the end of this year, early next year. And then soon after, there's some other solutions such as pastures, probiotics and vaccinations coming down the pipe. And we do like to keep the pressure on. I'm looking out at the room at some of our portfolio companies and giving them a little wink about that timeline. Some of our companies have to go through a regulatory process. You heard about that earlier in the week with Rochelle presenting what our framework is like in New Zealand. As a food exporter relying on safe food, we must ensure that what we're using is safe for the animal and the food supply chain in particular. So we're happy that we have a regulatory system, but we also probably agitate a little bit the regulator trying to get things streamlined. So one of our companies has submitted their dossier to our domestic regulator for registration. Some don't need to do it. Things like pasture solutions don't need to go through the regulatory process. And we're also hoping some of the other solutions we've invested in may have exemption, or at least partial exemption from regulation. But we are still investing. We've invested in 9 ventures so far. I can't say one out loud yet because we haven't announced it. But on this slide, it's my last slide, I just want to give you a picture of the portfolio approach that we are taking to investing in solutions across the landscape that could suit a pasture-based farming country like New Zealand. So we have inhibitors. We've got 3 companies in our portfolio that are developing different types of inhibitors. We are not afraid to double or triple down. We're trying to give ourselves the best chance of success. Also knowing that we want to have a range of tools, we want to give farmers choice, and some things will suit some farm systems or some livestock types better than others. AgriZeroNZ products, company that originally out of the UK, that's actually using an extract out of daffodils that happen to grow nicely on the rolling hill sheep country in New Zealand. The sheep don't eat the daffodils, by the way. You can harvest it and you can take an extract out. Hemanthamine is the name of the extract. It's a very effective methane inhibitor. It's still an early stage company. We've been going through animal trials in New Zealand with that. Agteria Biotech, this is a Swedish company. Again, they've been in New Zealand recently. They've identified a promising molecule. I believe there's some work happening here at UC Davis on that. We're excited to get that proven out through animal trials and fine-tuned. It would be the sort of thing we'd have to put into a dairy feed in the short term. Ruminant Biotech, this is the New Zealand company who are developing a slow-release bolus that sits in the rumen and releases an inhibitor over a time period of up to 6 months. They're at around nearly 5 months now, getting a 70% reduction in beef, and they've commenced the registration process. So we're pretty excited about that product coming to market and supporting them through that journey. On the vaccine, you heard from our two portfolio companies yesterday. It was great, that vaccine session. So we've got David and Colin here from Archaea Bio and from Lucidome Bio. A great solution for an extensive system. If we can get a vaccine that over time may optimise to 1 shot a year, maybe 1 shot ever, 30% reduction, that would be sort of the gold star, our North Star for a vaccination. But it is an interesting thing to talk about with the regulator when it's not a therapeutic vaccine, I can say that. Pastures Biolumic, this is our investment here. We have looked at a lot of different solutions for pasture. We're very open to exploring it because what better way to deliver an inhibitor to an animal than through a pasture when they're out grazing all day. For now, we've invested in Biolumic, which is a New Zealand US company. They are using UV light recipes to naturally modify the expression, the genetic expression of plants. In this case, it's ryegrass. So ryegrass is 70% of our grass in New Zealand, of our pasture, approximately, even with climate change. And they're using these UV light recipes to lift the lipid content a bit into sort of a sweet zone where you get more productivity, but also reduced methane. Probiotics, we're looking at a number of innovations in this space. It's incredibly exciting, some of the research and innovation in this area, particularly around the idea of either seeding a rumen and getting persistence, so we don't have to feed in every bite of feed these solutions. But Hoofprint Bio, I think I can see Catherine at the back, she's really tall so you can't miss her, have developed a really exciting enzyme probiotic solution for New Zealand, and we've been sending some rumen fluid over to the US so they can test that. And also Bovotica, a recent investment in an Australian company using the indigenous microbes found in low methane emitting animals, so quite a novel approach. And then there's the other areas where we have maybe made some investments, but they're not equity investments, or we're still searching. So nitrous oxide solutions that work in a pasture-based system when our main emissions come from a urine patch from an animal out on the field. So that's a fun one to consider. We're also looking at genetics. How do we accelerate that, given that there's already lots of work going on? And we're also thinking about adoption technology and delivery mechanisms, whether it's water dosing or other infrastructure needed. So that is me. I'm looking forward to hearing from everyone else and taking questions.